Hi everyone! Welcome to the first episode of A Careful Craft. As you can probably tell, I have switched filming locations. I used to stand over there and now I'm sitting on the floor. Not that you know where over there is, but that's where I was, and I stood up for like a really long time. And now I'm sitting on the floor, which is so nice. And I have this wonderful Amazon tapestry, and I am now recording on my phone instead of my camera, so audio and video should be better, which I'm very excited about. So let's talk about attachment style. Finding out my characters' attachment styles has really revolutionized the way I write them, just because it helps me understand on a deeper level why they are the way that they are and how that plays into the way they see the world and the thought processes and decision-making processes behind their actions. So I'm going to break down the 4 attachment styles for you and tell you kind of why they exist and how they're going to affect your characters. Because it's a simple psychology principle that drives your character's motivations, and understanding character motivation, creating real character motivation, is key to a great story. A disclaimer before we begin: I am not a licensed professional, I'm not a psychologist. I just have studied these principles for a long time, but if you want to hear from the experts, you can go to the sources in the description. They will be linked there. The biggest one I can recommend is the Personal Development School. Her name's Thais Gibson. Shout out. She's incredible. She teaches a lot of great stuff about attachment styles, so go check her out and follow the links in the description if you want more in-depth expert advice on attachment styles. And quick trigger warning for brief mentions of abuse and neglect. Okay, so let's start with the psychology behind these attachment styles and how they're created. The first people you attach to in life are your caregivers. As a baby, you have psychological needs programmed into your brain: food, learning, connection, all things you need to survive, and your brain knows that your caregiver can meet these needs. So your attachment to your caregiver is basically a matter of life and death, because obviously, when you're a baby at that age, you cannot care for yourself. So you're completely dependent on the people around you. So you attach to them in a certain way that will assure your needs get met. And once this attachment style is formed, it affects the way you interact with everyone you meet. Attachment style can change later in life too. For example, if a secure person enters an abusive relationship, they might leave the relationship with a completely different attachment style. And on the opposite side of the same coin, secure relationships can heal attachments that aren't secure and help people move towards security. So I want to introduce you to each attachment style. I want to show you how they act, how they present themselves, what they think, how they feel, what triggers them, what they want, and most importantly, why they are who they are. Hopefully, I can help you find where your character fits. Because once you know that, it will be so much easier for you to create realistic and meaningful motivation and obstacles for your characters. Keep in mind, people can have multiple attachment styles. They will always have a dominant one, and then sometimes they will gravitate towards a second one as well. So if you feel like your character fits in a couple of these, that's totally fine. Are you ready to crack your character open? Me too. The first attachment style we're going to talk about is the healthiest one, and it is a secure attachment style. Children form this attachment when their caregivers are safe, predictable, present, ready to respond to their needs and emotions. So if this describes your character's parents, your character will believe they are worthy of love, they will believe they are capable, they will think the world is safe and that people around them are safe. They will probably be flexible, consistent, vulnerable, and trusting. Relationships won't feel threatening or scary to them. Securely attached people still have feelings and can get anxious and nervous in relationships, but as Thais puts it, they just have less minds in their minefield. And so this means that things like disconnection from important people, miscommunication, someone pulling away from them, instead of those things being triggers for them, things that bring up a lot of past trauma, they're just stressors. In relationships, securely attached people want clear and consistent communication, they want reliability, and they want predictability. So the securely attached person is most likely to gravitate towards other securely attached people. So that was the easy one. Now we get into the ones that are a little bit tougher on your characters. This second attachment style is the anxious-preoccupied. Children form anxious-preoccupied attachments when their caregivers are inconsistent. So caregivers may be warm sometimes and the child gets their needs met sometimes, But at other times, the caregivers pull away, they're distant, they're detached, they're cold, and that's when the child doesn't get their needs met. So the child is living in this inconsistent environment where they don't really know when their needs are going to be met. Every attachment style from here on out has core wounds, and these are thought processes that will come up when the attachment style is triggered. So the anxious preoccupied character will have one or more core wounds of I'm unsafe, I might be abandoned, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, I don't matter. So these are going to be the thought patterns running through their heads when they are triggered by something. They're going to start thinking, oh, this is happening because I'm unlovable. This is happening because I'm not good enough. Because this is happening, I might be abandoned. This is really great. You can use core wounds to pin down character voice so well because they tell you exactly how a character is going to respond to something happening. So if this something is triggering, if this situation is triggering to your character in terms of attachment, this is what they're going to think, at least if they're anxious preoccupied. If this describes your character, they most likely are going to be really warm and really friendly, like very generous and thoughtful people. They want good connections. However, they have an unstable sense of identity and will often morph into who they're told to be or who those around them want them to be. They can easily become codependent and enmeshed in relationships, and they have trouble communicating and standing up for their own needs. They're hyper aware of human behavior and they're hyper vigilant, so they're extremely aware of their surroundings pretty much all the time. They look for potential abandonment, and then if they find the potential for abandonment, they dive in and do everything they can to make sure that abandonment doesn't happen. They often believe that they need to make their own needs small and easy because if they are a burden on other people, those people will leave. So they put others first and neglect themselves. Triggers for this attachment style include abandonment, real or perceived, inconsistent patterns or responses in relationships, avoidant behavior from those around them, or people pulling away. When these triggers come up, the anxious preoccupied will often take a step even further and closer into the relationship as an attempt to solve the problem because they have learned that soothing and solutions come from other people. And so they will move even further into the relationship, which can come off as needy and clingy to those around them. But this is them trying to fix that. They often have a hard time taking care of themselves, spending time alone, and fostering their own sense of independence. Characters with this attachment style will want regular and consistent communication and probably reassurance in their relationships, and they can have pretty high expectations for that until they start to learn to self-soothe more and find more comfort and safety within themselves. Attachment style 3 is the dismissive-avoidant. Children learn to be dismissive-avoidant when the caregiver actively ignores their needs or even distances themselves and pulls away from the child when the child needs something. Caregivers probably suppressed the child's emotion or even responded with anger. They may have even been punished for having needs and emotions. And dismissive avoidants were often expected to be more emotionally mature and independent than what's realistic for a child. So if your character is avoidantly attached, their core wounds are going to be, I'm going to be abandoned and there's nothing I can do about it, I'm powerless or stuck, I'm misunderstood, I'm unsafe, and there's something wrong with me. I do want to specify the difference between abandonment for the dismissive avoidant and the anxious preoccupied. Anxious preoccupied people are thinking, I will be abandoned if I don't do something. If I don't prove myself or show this person that they should stay, I will be abandoned. Dismissive avoidants are just more like, I will just be abandoned. There's not really anything I can do about it. It just is going to happen. So anxious preoccupieds kind of try to prove themselves and vie for that safety and security from the person. And dismissive avoidants don't do that as much. They just kind of think that abandonment is a given. It's just going to happen. Again, these core wounds will be the thoughts and beliefs that are triggered and that will go through your character's head and play into their decision making when something goes wrong. So if a trigger crops up in your writing, you're going to want to use these to make sure your character's voice is congruent with their attachments. Dismissive avoidance can be one of two things. Either they can be really cold and standoffish and slow to warm up, or they can be super sociable and outgoing. But the sociable avoidance, typically when you try to emotionally connect with them, there's a wall, a very strong wall that you can't get past. So they are open and sociable to a point. They might open up to people on a surface level, but things get really uncomfortable for them when people try to dig deeper. When asked about their feelings, these people will often say, I think, rather than I feel. So like, how do you feel about that? Well, I think this and this is going on. They're very logical. They're very in their heads. They're all about facts and proofs, and they can be pretty detached from the real world. And this is because as children, they were told to repress everything. So that's what they do. They learned connection is bad and they're only safe when they are alone. So essentially, it's the exact opposite from the anxious preoccupied, because when an anxiously attached person is feeling unsafe, they turn to others for help and find comfort and safety and security in the people around them, and they often have trouble soothing themselves. And the dismissive avoidant will believe they're only safe if they're alone. So anybody around them could potentially be a threat, and they are the only one who can actually bring them security and safety. These characters will be triggered by people getting too close, losing their independence or their sense of control, criticism, people expressing deep emotions, and codependency or enmeshment. In a relationship, they want independence, autonomy, and time to be alone. They want to be understood, and they don't want to do guesswork about the needs of others around them. They don't read minds, so they want very clear and direct communication when it comes to what the people around them need and want. And a big priority for them is harmony. They don't like conflict. Relationships where they can have banter and laugh and have fun are great for dismissive avoidance. Finally, fourth, we have the fearful avoidant, otherwise known as the disorganized attachment. Characters with this attachment style probably had caregivers who were unable to take care of them or who responded to their needs in a frightening, threatening way that scared them. They were probably abandoned or neglected, and their caregivers were probably highly unpredictable. So people with disorganized attachments are very good at reading other people and reading situations, because as children, they constantly had to do that to know whether or not their environment was safe. If this matches your character, here are their core wounds. I'm bad. I'm not good enough. I'm unsafe, I'll be attacked, I'll be abandoned, I'm not worthy of love, I'm helpless. Your character will be thinking one or several of these things when they go through something triggering. People with disorganized attachments think that love is earned, and so they're extremely giving, and they do enjoy giving and being generous, but they also do feel like they have to do it or else they will be abandoned. They have this interesting dichotomy where they're either really high achievers, just zoomed in and focused on typically one area of life, or they are having a really hard time, struggling with addiction, struggling with chaotic lifestyles. They're very improvement oriented. In fact, they can often feel like they are not ready or worthy of a relationship yet, because there's still so much they have to work through and work on in themselves before they can be a good partner. And the disorganized attachment isn't super interested in material things. They're more interested in fulfillment and empowerment. So with careers, they are 100% more likely to pick the job that pays less if it gives them a higher sense of purpose or empowers them somehow. Disorganized attachments are interesting because they can flip-flop. So they are called fearful avoidant because they have traits of both the anxious preoccupied, fearful, and the dismissive avoidant. So fearful avoidant, they have both. And what can happen is if a disorganized person is around an anxious preoccupied person, they might lean a little more dismissive. And if they're around a dismissive avoidant person, they might lean a little more fearful. Along with this comes the strange duality of being open, but also extremely closed off and very suspicious. So even if these characters are opening up and confiding in other characters, they deep down probably don't actually trust those people, at least not in the beginning. And lastly, they are going to be hyper aware of their environment, as I mentioned, because as children, they constantly had to assess to know whether or not the environment was safe. People with this attachment style feel a lot. They feel big feelings. They are very sensitive and empathetic, but one of their main coping mechanisms is repression, because that's what they've learned. So a lot of the time, the only tool in their arsenal that they have to cope with everything that they're feeling, all these monstrous, gigantic feelings that are overwhelming them, is to shove them down and not look at them. They really want connection, but at the same time, they're terrified of it, and they have chronic guilt and shame just kind of running in their heads on a loop. If your character has a disorganized attachment style, here are some things that will probably trigger them. Rejection and abandonment, real or perceived. Feeling unable to prove their worth. Feeling like they don't matter or they're not seen or heard. Feeling trapped or powerless, and enmeshment and codependency. In a relationship, these characters will want to feel like they matter, and they want to feel capable, like they can do it, like they're okay on their own. They really don't like feeling stuck or trapped. So if a disorganized character is stuck in a place where they feel stuck, if they're in a situation where they feel trapped, they're probably not going to stay there very long. They don't like it. And they appreciate a healthy balance of closeness and space in their relationships. They like to rotate between time together and time alone. So there's all 4 attachment styles. I hope all this information helps you in developing your wonderful characters. Your character's attachment style will determine how they respond to the world around them, how they respond to the people around them, how they think about themselves, their relationships, their lives, and what they decide to do next. So it's a really good thing to know. As I said before, all my sources for this video are linked in the description below, so if you want more in-depth information, you can totally go visit those. There's also a quiz linked in the description. You can use this to find out your character's attachment style. It will give you a result of a percentage for each of the 4 attachment styles, so you can see which attachment styles your character has the most of. Let me know in the comments, what is your character's attachment style? How do they see the world? How do they see conflict, their relationships, themselves? Super interesting stuff. Now go develop your characters. Happy trails.